everybody, it is Dean Z. I'm speaking to you today from the beautiful Jeffries Lounge in Jeffries Hall. We name everything the same here at the University of Michigan Law School, just one name. And I am really thrilled to be here with Professor Leah Litman, who is going to talk to us about clerkships today. Professor Litman is kind of famous. She has an actual podcast that is very informative and followed by the world at large. So I would commend it to you. Strict Scrutiny. You feeling comfortable, Leah? I mean, I know.
I hope I will be able to get out my words in this setting.
Yes. One of the most exciting things about Leah is that I admitted her to law school, and I view it as a triumph. And now she is teaching here. So, all right, clerkship. So we have done two different episodes, I guess, talking about big law hiring and changes that have happened there, and then private sector hiring and what's going on there. And I wanted to talk to you about clerkships, judicial clerkships, because you've been very active at Michigan in helping people with that process. But I want to speak generally about, what it is really more than changes in the process. So first of all, what is a clerkship?
So when we use the word clerkship, we're referring to something where usually recent law school graduates go to work for a judge, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, but it's a term position. And they kind of help the judge do everything the judge does, from preparing for oral arguments, to working with the parties, to schedule different parts of the cases, to writing opinions or whatnot. You are basically an assistant to the judge with respect to judge stuff, is the way I put it.
Okay, great. So who would be well suited, like what kind of law student should want to do a clerkship, do you think? Why would anybody want to do a clerkship?
I think there are a few reasons why someone would like a clerkship or think doing one would be useful for them. One is it's kind of a fun job. I mean, you are a recent law school graduate and you get to help a judge decide cases. You are writing the opinions that you spent the last 3 years in law school poring over and studying. So it's kind of a cool job where you get to see the inner workings of chambers and participate in a neat aspect of the judicial process that you probably won't have the opportunity to do for a while again. So that's one reason. Second is, in part for that reason or reasons related to it, I think clerkships can be useful professional development because you do a lot of research, you do a lot of writing, you see a lot of different types of advocacy, and you're oftentimes talking with the judge about what worked and what didn't. So it can be helpful to prepare you for doing different types of work you will end up doing as a lawyer. Another reason is I think they can be useful professionally in other ways. Mm-hmm. If you look at, for example, the people who are being nominated as judges, many of them worked as law clerks, right after graduating. And so I think it can be a useful professional credential if you are interested in going into certain careers in the law. So you can learn a lot. Can be kind of a cool job and also professionally useful. Those are kind of the main reasons why I think someone would be interested in clerking.
Yeah, I clerked too, and I always thought it was, the ability to, a glimpse of, I only clerked for one judge, so obviously small sample size, but you really get a sense of how do judges approach cases in a way that I feel like is almost impossible to do without having had that experience, or maybe takes many, many years of litigating. So sometimes people will say, though, I don't want to be a litigator. I don't want to go into court, so I don't think I should do a clerkship. Do you have an opinion about that?
So I think it depends on what someone might be interested in or their hesitations. So first, I should note there are a bunch of specialized courts that hear cases that are more tailored to practice areas other than litigation. So for example, there's the Delaware Chancery Court. Delaware Chancery Courts handle the vast majority of corporate law business issues. So if that's your area of interest, that might be a court that you are especially interested in. Second, and relatedly, there are other federal courts with specialized areas of expertise. There are bankruptcy courts. There are courts that hear a lot of cases related to federal agencies. So those specialized areas of law might also be of interest, even if you are not interested in generally being a litigator. And then third is, as we were kind of talking about, a clerkship can be a useful professional credential, even if you aren't necessarily just focused on litigation. So let's say you really want to go back to your home state and run for office. Maybe it might make sense to do a state court clerkship, in that area as well, to kind of build and deepen ties within that jurisdiction and within that bar.
Yeah, well, you've anticipated one of the questions I had, which was, what are the different types of courts that have clerkships? And so you talked about specialty courts, and there are a variety of those. But state and federal, I feel like that is a very common decision that students are facing, particularly state Supreme Court versus either federal trial court or federal appellate court. I'm wondering, do you have a take on what the differences there are and who might be well suited for one or another?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about state court clerkship, we're often talking about state Supreme Court clerkships. And so I think those clerkships offer some real benefits that other types of clerkships don't. One is that state Supreme Courts, like the United States Supreme Court, often get to pick what cases they hear. And so you get to participate in the process of finding cool legal issues that are of interest to the justices and of public importance as well. And so I think that's a really cool thing you get to do in state Supreme Court clerkships that you aren't going to get to do in most federal clerkships. Second is state Supreme Courts have, this is going to sound like kind of technical, but they get to make what's called common law, state common law, which is just judge-made law in a way that isn't true for the most part in the federal courts. And so that means if you are doing a state Supreme Court clerkship, you kind of get to help these judges make up a body of law that you think would be a good body of law. And that can be really fun and rewarding. You are not trying to figure out what the United States Supreme Court is going to do because the United States Supreme Court doesn't get to control what Michigan's state law is or means, or what Minnesota's state law is or means. And so they can be really professionally rewarding and get you into different areas of law that just aren't going to come up really in federal court clerkships.
Right. And they're also cherry picking. I don't know if you said this, but like they
get to decide what cases they hear.
Whereas at the federal appellate court, it's whatever anyone wants to appeal, you've got to do, even if it is not the most interesting or meritorious case sometimes. So if you want to do a clerkship and you're a law student, what do judges value, do you think? I mean, obviously, well, you'll probably answer this, many different judges, but do you have some sense of sort of overall, what kinds of traits, experiences, backgrounds do judges value when they're looking for their clerks?
Yeah, so I think it is important to note at the top, judges are very different. Judges have different preferences, and so I don't want anyone to rule themselves out because they have, a background that is a little bit different than anything I might be describing in general terms or what they imagine, a judge might be interested in. One thing is judges are looking for people who are going to be good lawyers. And so there are different proxies or different evidence for that, doing well in law school, participating in clinics, participating in moot courts, being on a law journal, all of that is some evidence that you're going to be good at the analysis, the research, the writing, the conversations you're going to have with the judge about the law. So that's one thing. Second is they want to work with someone who's going to be good to work with and also fun to have around. And so that can mean showing that you are the sort of person who can hold down a job, do it well, and be fun to have around. So if you don't have pre-law school work experience, I think it's additionally important to get to know professors so that they can talk to you or talk to the judge about what it would be like to work with you in a kind of closer work environment and setting that differs from the classroom. All judges care about writing, so showing good writing skills is also important. So those are kind of three loose things, but again, judges vary.
Right. The judge I clerked for, I actually did multiple years of clerking for him, and he was always very concerned about the dynamic between clerks, too. So it wasn't just getting along with the judge, it's getting along with the other clerks. It's a very small sort of family that you are with intensely for 1 year. So these are, So thinking about how to demonstrate that, I think, is good advice. So without going into excruciating detail about the ins and outs of the application process because it is complicated. There's differences between the different courts too, right? Can you tell me what someone might want to look for in a law school if they really want the chance to do a clerkship? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, a few different things. One is, they should look to see what sort of advising the law school offers for students who are interested in clerkships, whether there's a clerkship advisor or advisors, how many resources the career services offers. I think a second thing is they should look at the different course offerings the law school offers, outside of the first year curriculum to see whether there are going to be opportunities to showcase the sort of skills that judges look for in clerks and also opportunities to get to know professors in different settings so that they can speak to what sort of law clerk you are going to be. Right. Looking for ways the school offers to get to know professors and demonstrate skills that can be in course offerings, that can be in extracurricular offerings, as well as looking for the sort of career counseling and resources that the school offers for clerkships in particular, and I think post-law school career opportunities in general are the two things I would probably say. Yeah, I'm going to sort of try to frame this as a question, which is really just my opinion, and the question is going to be like, do you agree? Or something like that. It's going to be like a faculty workshop question. Yes. Here's a comment. Question mark?
Yeah, exactly. Right. When I started working at the law school, I was a judicial clerkship advisor for 2 years. And one thing that I felt was really valuable for our students was if they were willing to sort of look at the United States as a whole for doing clerkships. I remember one person in particular who I worked with who had not really shot the lights out here, to say the least, had a pretty rough GPA. But he really wanted to clerk, and he was very open, and he went to a state which is far from Michigan, let's say, and a very different part of the country, and had a great experience there. So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like knowing that a school might send to multiple jurisdictions is useful for that, because even though it was far away, this judge knew him. I mean, what do you think about student willingness? Actually, I guess here's the question. What do you think about student willingness to spread their wings a little bit, like to look outside the box, either for a type of judge or a part of the country or...
Yeah, so I guess I would begin with the caveat that I think our approach to clerkship advising here is to help students figure out what they are interested in and where they would succeed. And so I don't view it as my job or role to tell students, well, you should apply anywhere and everywhere to every single judge under the sun. But I do think, of course, there is something to the idea that if you really want a clerkship, applying to more judges than just the 3 to 4 judges that happen to be in the city where you anticipate wanting to live, of course, that's going to increase your chances of getting a clerkship. And so it would be helpful to find a law school, right, that provides opportunities for many different types of clerkships, many different places with many different types of judges. Right. But the other thing I would add there is I think sometimes people might underappreciate the value of finding clerkships that work for you for reasons that might not work for other people. So I know 2 people who have gone off to different locations just to try it out. And it turns out they actually really like living there and they chose to stay. Right. Or they were really interested in working for a judge with a particular background. And that judge, again, didn't happen to be in the city where they wanted to live, but they absolutely loved working for them. And so I think figuring out what sort of work opportunities would work for you and where you would succeed, it can be really helpful. And again, that's just not going to be limited to only the judges in the zip code, where I live now or plan to live in 2 years. Right.
That leads me, I think, to what is really my last question, which is what resources are out there to help people learn about judges? If you want to judge with, say you wanted a judge who went to your undergraduate alma mater, or who, I don't know, worked for a particular organization before becoming a judge, what have you. Are there resources out there that people can check out?
Yeah, so there are both resources that are internal to law schools and then also kind of generally available resources. So a lot of law schools will have some sort of clerkship database that allows you to search judges, who might have gone to particular schools or judges in particular areas or judges who have hired from your law school or whatnot. So that's one resource. But then, of course, there's also this thing called the internet. And it turns out that that's super helpful in finding information about judges. So, judges will often have Wikipedia entries. They will also have the statements that accompanied their nominations that describe probably where they went to law school, where they worked before, and whatnot. And so you can get that information pretty easily now, which is a huge resource. And the internet will also tell you if the judge had any notable rulings, that might be of interest to you or might affect, how interested or whether you're interested in a particular clerkship. www.google.com.
That's funny because when I was clerking, there were many fewer resources available. And I remember once my judge interviewing a clerk candidate who had done a lot of research, and my judge was freaked out by it. It was just horrified because it was so unusual at the time. And now I think you're maybe missing a trick if you're not doing all that research.
Well, you certainly don't have to go through and read every single opinion, the judge has ever written. But yeah, it would probably be helpful to Google your prospective employer and figure out, generally what their background is, where they're located and whatnot. So would definitely recommend that.
Yeah. So I have actually one more question that I want to ask about this. When I was when I was looking for clerkships a million years ago and so forth, there was some degree of people suggesting that you look for judges appointed by one or another president and staying away from judges, of one or another president. I did not take that approach, and I am glad I didn't because I loved the judge that I clerked for, and we could not have been more different politically. But I feel like this is an ongoing and perhaps increasing interest among students. And I wonder, do you have a take on that? And how do you think people should approach that question?
Yeah, so this is a sort of advice where there's only so much I can say generally because it's probably going to vary person by person and judge by judge, how exactly it cashes out. I should say I'm also someone who clerked for judges with pretty different worldviews and who have different priors, than I do. And I also had a positive experience and learned a lot in those clerkships. But I also don't want to downplay, the increasing significance of political affiliation and ideology with judicial appointments. It's no secret, and empiricists, political scientists, social scientists, can tell you that, of course, the party that appointed a judge is going to predict their rulings on an important set of issues. And so that could very well affect your interest in any particular chambers. Mm-hmm. Now, what I encourage students to think about is there are differences, between judges who are appointed by the same president. And so it might be worth asking, well, what type of judge is this? Some judges, frankly, they themselves are going to be looking to hire ideologically and looking to hire people who agree with them. And in that case, probably not going to be a great match. It's not going to be an issue. But also, again, you can figure out what type of judge, you are potentially applying to by doing a little bit of research and figuring out what sort of opinions it is they are releasing. And any individual person's comfort level in working in any particular chambers is just going to depend on a host of individual factors, like, well, what are the issues that this judge, might have staked out particular positions on? Mm-hmm. What are the issues that matter to me that could affect, my enjoyment in a particular chambers? And how much importance do I place on that relative to other factors, like location, like what sort of boss a judge is, the work hours, or how they actually structure the workplace. Yeah. And so there are a bunch of considerations, I think, that go into, picking the right clerkship or finding the right set of judges to apply to. And I'm not going to deny that politics and ideology, is one such factor for a lot of people, but figuring out the precise politics and ideology, I think, is a little bit more complicated than just asking, well, what president appointed the judge?
Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. I want to wind up in some amusing fashion, but nothing fantastic is coming to me. I guess I just want to know, Leah, are you a big fan of Rick's American Cafe?
So my most recent memory of Rick's American Cafe is a law school classmate breaking their ankle after a night at Rick's. And so I can't say I've been looking to repeat that experience, especially in my older, more bone-fragile years.
Yes, right.
But I am familiar with it.
Sure, prudence is a virtue, definitely. All right, on that very important note, thank you all for watching. Thank you so much, Leah, for Professor Litman, for participating in this with us. And yeah, wherever you go blue.